5 the. Maybe it was so poor video quality.
With my other attendees.
Yep. Okay, promote to panelist. Okay, now you're in.
Hola.
Sorry, we were on mute there.
No, that's good. I figured. How's it going?
Fine, I think.
Okay, stay co-host this time.
Says I'm the host.
Yes, that's good.
So
That's,
you're gonna stay co-host.
yep, but I can
Okay.
share, everything.
Yeah, no, this sounds good. All right, well, I'm gonna do my last restroom break, and then I'll be back. I'll put us on mute for a second.
Okay.
Used to work with their city clerk years ago, quite a bit.
That's what she said.
We'll leave this.
He says you're a wonderful guy to work with.
Oh,
And you just shoot.
And if you want to try public comment, you know, that raise his hand and Olivia will come
that's
in.
good. I hope she
Might be for
feeling comfortable out there.
It's
She knows her business.
yeah, it's been a year of, kind of some crazy change that she's had to deal with, and she has been right on top of that the whole time.
Good.
She really is a wonderful asset to the city.
Okay.
I'm glad she's there.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. We're gonna get started here in about 1 minute. Just for the record, I do see that we have for board members, Jason Olds and Scott Kress joining us online. And board members in the room, we've got Mayor Church and Mr. Cleaver. So
Are you ready? So I will do it.
I will mute myself until it's time. Thank you.
go ahead, Jerry.
Okay. I'm gonna go ahead and call the meeting to order. This is the regularly scheduled meeting for Wednesday, January 15th of the past policy board. I'd like to go ahead and do introductions. Let's start with you, Mayor.
Thank you, sir. Larry Church, Mayor of the City of North Pole.
I will go online for the board members.
I'm Scott Grass with Fairbanks North Star Borough Assembly.
Mr. Olds, are you hearing us?
I'm receiving a chat. Oh, it says that Jason Olds is having audio challenges, but I do believe that confirms that he can hear us at least.
Okay. Well, we'll record he's here, and for those in the room, if we can get your introductions for our record keeper. Start with you, Kellen.
I'm Kellen Stillman. I'm with the Borough Community Planning Department.
John Galligan with the Borough Community Planning Department.
And online, who do we have joining us today?
Hi, my name is Barbara Haney. I'm a resident of the North Pole area. And I'm here in my that capacity.
Thanks, Barbara.
Jack Barnwell, News Minor.
Al Beck, DOT.
Pam Golden, DOT.
Ben White, DOT.
Brett Nelson, DOT.
Lauren Little, DOT.
Yvette Hall, DOT.
Bob Fairfax, City of Fairbanks.
Jenny Wright, DOT.
Jeremiah Cotter, City of Fairbanks Public Works.
Okay.
Any others online that we?
Yeah, one more, Jason Hill, DOT. Thank you.
Kim Solian with MVP for Transportation.
All right, thank you all for listening in today. Appreciate that. Need an approval of the agenda for today, if I can get a motion.
Move to approve the agenda from today, Wednesday, January 25th.
Moved by Mayor Church.
Sorry, pardon, January 15th. 2025.
We'll accept that. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Okay, is that you, Scott? I think so.
Yes, it was.
Okay. Any objections or changes? Seeing none, I'm going to say that we have the agenda in front of us without objection. Moving on to item 4, approval of December 18th meeting minutes. Do I have a motion for that approval?
So moved.
Second
Moved and seconded. Did you get the two names?
by Kress and Church.
Yes, yeah, okay. Any changes to the minutes? Any objection to the minutes?
Good.
Okay. I'm gonna go ahead and rule that the minutes are approved without change. We go to item number 5. Turn it over to Mr. Fox.
Thank you, Mr. Cleaver. Beginning on page 12 is our staff report for activities that we carried out over the past month since we last met. I want to highlight a few things. First of which is the Alaska Pier Exchange. The Federal Highways is hosting down in Anchorage for the 3 MPOs in the state, as well as the state DOT, and with special invitations from state DOTs and MPOs from North Dakota and Minnesota to have a 3-day peer exchange on MPO coordination during development of the STIP. That's going to be held January 28th to the 30th. From our board, Jason Olds will be joining us. He's also on the Anchorage MPO board. And then also guests from Fairbanks, from Fairbanks, North Scarborough, Tom Hewitt and Don Galligan will be joining us for that peer exchange. Next up here, we have at Fast Planning a few meetings on an upcoming grant application to the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. We had meetings with project partners, which included the state DOT, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, Fish and Game, Tanana Valley Watershed Association, Fairbanks Saltwater Conservation District, and Trout Unlimited. All those partners, including Fast Planning, to submit an $8 million grant application to upgrade culverts on Chena Slough, Cripple Creek, and Chena Hot Springs Road at a number of road crossing locations that were identified with undersized culverts and earthen berms that need to be upgraded for fish passage and resiliency to flooding at those locations. So for today's agenda, I have drafted a letter of support for that grant application from Fast Planning. I'm hoping that the policy board will approve so that can be included in that grant application, and we'll take that up underneath agenda item 9B. Also want to make note here that I did attend the Chamber's Government Relations Committee earlier this week to discuss with them the recent announcements from the EPA and the Federal Register with regard to their intention to approve the state implementation plan for air quality and defer sanctions for our area. So I gave them a briefing on that, as well as had an overall discussion with them on how this relates to conformity freeze that our local planning plan is currently under. And I believe Jason Olds is signed up for another one of their committees for, I think it's next week, to give a similar update on status of air quality for our area and the recent Federal Register notices.
Matt Thomas.
Welcome, Mayor.
Good seeing you, Mayor.
Under correspondence and communications, I did receive a letter from the Alaska Railroad Corporation regarding the Chena Riverwalk project and the status of the current right-of-way negotiations with our state DOT. That letter is included behind the staff report, so I'll cover that here in a minute. On the next page, I also drafted a comment letter to the EPA on one of the Federal Register notices that I mentioned with regard to deferral of the sanctions for the Fairbanks PM 2.5 area. And the comment letter that I drafted for that is included as an action item for the board today underneath agenda item 9A. So we'll discuss that when we get to that item. For public outreach, Chair Cleaworth had asked us to put together a glossary of all the terms and acronyms that we use here at Fast Planning, many of which I just used in my introduction here on the staff report. And I was going to turn it over briefly to Olivia to show you the progress we've made so far on that and get a glossary up on our webpage that doesn't just explain, what the acronym stands for, but also gives a sentence on what it means. And Olivia is it is now, I think, public facing on our website.
Yep.
And we have a few edits to make, but it's probably 99% there.
Yeah, thanks, Jackson. Hopefully everyone can see this and hear me okay, but it's pretty straightforward. Of course, you're seeing sort of the editing option perspective on my side, but just here under the resources tab of our website, fastplanning.us, you'll find this glossary tab, and throughout there, you'll find quite a few terms and definitions for each of those. We dive into funding categories and regular terminology that we use in our day-to-day practices, as well as elaborate on different organizations that we work with and other entities and general transportation planning terminology. So let me know if you have any questions or if you see a term on here that you think could be a little bit different, defined differently, or if you don't see a term that you would like to see.
All right, thanks, Olivia. So quickly back to the staff report on page 13, just two more items here. Underneath funding, we have prepared a preliminary draft of the first amendment to our transportation improvement program. This is shoring up a lot of projects that were paused as a result of the conformity freeze, and we know that the conformity freeze is not yet lifted. But we are actively working on a major amendment to our funding plan to get a few projects that were paused and moving forward again. And those include the Steese Johansson interchange, Old Steese reconstruction, Steese Highway milepost 2 to 5 resurfacing, and the airport Cushman intersection. In total, among all of the construction phases of those 4 projects, it's about $150 million investment that we hope to experience in 2026, 2027, and potentially out to 2028. So we are anxious to get this conformity freeze lifted so that we can advance this funding amendment forward. We'll be discussing this underneath agenda item 8B, those projects and many other projects. But just want to make note that this is still a work in progress, that there are still funding amounts and dates of when the funding is expected to hit to be provided to me by DOT. So I don't have all the information yet that I need to complete that amendment. But I'll show you kind of where we're at with that and present to you all a number of decision points that have been presented to the technical committee for feedback to provide staff direction on what and how to fund some of the projects that are in the pipeline. And the technical committee did have a number of recommendations for the board on about half of those decision points. So we'll be considering those decision points as an action item here today for the board if you accept the technical committee recommendations or want to go a different direction. Also want to make note that I did draft a call for project nominations for the electric vehicle charging stations. That is included in your packet. It's not only the call for project nominations, but we have a fact sheet prepared, which outlines all the requirements that applicants would have to meet if they were interested in being a site vehicle charging station. So we'll take that up as an action item underneath item 9C. Behind the staff report, pages 14 and 15, this includes the letter from the Alaska Railroad Corporation back to DOT. Again, they are in active right-of-way negotiations between the two parties to secure a land interest in constructing the path on railroad property for this project on the north side of the Chena River between the Pioneer Park footbridge and Pegger Road. Kind of reading between the lines here in this letter, it appears that right-of-way negotiations are effectively stalled due to some kind of differences in restrictions on each party's side. The railroad has provided a land use permit to the city of Fairbanks for installation of the trail, but with the federal funding that we're using, that's not a sufficient interest to move the project forward. The city's land use permit was originally a 5-year permit. It's now renewed annually, and at any time the railroad could terminate that permit and ask that the new path that were constructed to be removed. That's problematic with federal funds because the expectation is if you're using federal money for a facility out there, that facility exists and is used by the community for the life of the facility, which would generally be about 20 years. So DOT is looking for a long-term land lease or acquisition of the property, but the railroad thinks that the land use permit suffices. So staff and the real estate department at the Alaska Railroad are suggesting that this be elevated to the executive level for both parties as the path forward at this time, which means some of our locally elected officials that serve on our board, they're encouraging them to attend a future Alaska Railroad board meeting to have this conversation to sort out the path forward. The Chena River Walk will be taking up this issue on January 22nd. I will be at that meeting, and they are preparing a letter to our local mayors, city councils, and borough assembly to encourage encourage you all to work on a path forward with the Alaska Railroad. So I don't think there's any action needed at this time. I would wait until the Chena Riverfront Commission letter comes out. And then we could potentially discuss this at next month's meeting after that letter is out as far as the strategy moving forward to assist this project. Okay, next topic here, page 16. Just want to make note that the Borough Assembly did pass a resolution supporting the planning, design, and construction of a bicycle pedestrian path connecting North Pole to Eielson Air Force Base. As shown on page 17, this was actually a condition of local planning approval for the Chena flood control bridges, which are being replaced here over the next few years, to include a separated pathway to provide a safe pedestrian and bicycle facility connection that's not merely a roadway shoulder. In conjunction with that bridge replacement project. The Assembly is also, as part of this resolution, requesting from Fast Planning that we include this bicycle and pedestrian path connection between North Pole and Eielson Air Force Base in our next update to our long-range transportation plan, that work will begin next month. So this is something for background to consider as we work on that document. Page 19. I just want to bring to your attention, there will be an open house event held by DOT at Hotel North Pole, the Chena Lake Recreation Area Bicycle and Pedestrian Access Project. That will be on Thursday, January 30th from 5 to 7 p.m. For those folks that are interested in following along with that project. This is a project being funded through Fast Planning, utilizing our air quality funds to provide a new access to Chena Lake Recreation via Black Road. And then, sorry, two more updates here. Page 21. As I'm sure you've all heard, the school district announced their latest list of potential school closures. 5 schools are included in this year's package, and one of those is Pearl Creek Elementary. This was an issue that we faced last year as Pearl Creek was on the proposed school closures list. It did survive that list last year, but it's back on the second year in a row, and we do have a $4.5 million aspect of this project planned to go to construction at Pearl Creek this coming summer. We'll discuss this a little bit later underneath agenda item 8B, but the technical committee did recommend that project not go out to bid until we see the outcome of whether or not the school will be closed. From what I've read in the paper and from who I've spoken to as far as borough staff, I believe the school board is intending to make a decision on which schools they will close, and maybe all of them. But that decision, as I understand, is now scheduled for February 4th. So in any event, just something that needs to be at the forefront of our minds as we move through our decision-making process. And then my last update is the EPA's recent Federal Register notices that were published this month, again, relating to their intent to fully approve the state's air quality implementation plan, as well as defer sanctions. On page 23, this is the section that's really pertinent to all of us, related to the transportation conformity freeze on our local funding plan. As we understand, the Federal Register notice is stating EPA's intent to pause the sanction clock and defer sanctions. But as I understand, there is still one more step that EPA needs to complete to actually lift the conformity freeze. And that is producing a transportation adequacy determination, kind of a technical term. But what that means is that the EPA would be accepting the proposed motor vehicle emission budgets that were included in the state's air quality plan, which we have to do a regional air quality emissions analysis showing that we meet those budgets. That analysis has been done. But in reading the Federal Register notice on the intent to approve the state's implementation plan for air quality, there are a few sentences in there stating EPA does believe that the motor vehicle emission budgets submitted by the state are approvable. So my hope is that lifting the conformity freeze is imminent. We have not been given a timeline. We don't know if this will be February, March, April, but it will be after the end of the public comment period. So I know that Jason Olds is online. If there's anything I missed there, or anything you need to correct that I said, please chime in. may still be having audio issues. Okay, well, at this time, that concludes my report.
Thank you, Jackson, and Olivia, thank you for your work on the acronyms. Look forward to seeing that. I think that'll be a great help for years to come. A question for you, oh, well, first, let me go to the board. Any questions for Jackson on anything in the reports? Sure.
Good report. Good job.
I just have one in the letter from the railroad. You mentioned the long-term lease problems. Is there still an indemnification problem? My read of this is that there is.
I believe there is, yes.
So there's two major issues then, would be the lease and the indemnification?
Yes.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay, we're gonna move on to item number 6, update on the STIP. Do we have anyone signed up to do that?
We don't have anybody signed up, but I did see that Lauren Little and Ben White with DOT are online. And I see that Lauren Little has raised her hand, so Olivia, if you'll unmute Lauren, we'll give her the floor on this item.
Yep, she should have privileges, should be good to go.
Yep, I am. Thanks. Yep, we're getting close, working out the final details, make sure we have an accurate reviewable product. The next step will be delivering it to Federal Highways for a review period ahead of the public comment period. Ben, not sure if you have additional details there on the MPO coordination piece.
No, that I don't have anything else to add to it.
Okay. Yeah, my understanding is there's the Federal Highways and MPO early review to make sure that we've got everything captured and laid out in a reviewable fashion.
Okay. Any questions from the board members? Seeing none, we're going to move on then to public comment. Public comment will be on any item that is not an action item on our agenda. And we would appreciate it. We don't have a time limit on public comments, but if it could be 5 minutes or less, we would appreciate that. So first off, let's take anyone in the room. Is there anyone in the room? Oh, come on. Okay, nobody here. Anyone online then? Show who they are.
We have Barbara Haney that has raised her hand.
Barbara, go ahead.
Hi, I wanted to comment on the Nordale PD roundabout and on the Richardson access survey. Is this the appropriate time or should I wait?
Technically, we have an action item coming up
Okay,
on that.
I can be patient then. Thank you.
Yeah, if you had a time problem, I'll let you go ahead, but if you can hang with us, I appreciate it.
Sure.
Okay. Anyone else out there? Don't see anyone.
See any other hands at this time?
Gonna go ahead and close public comments. Takes us to item 8, old business. Alaska DOT Metropolitan Planning Area Boundary Review and proposed revisions to the intergovernmental operating agreement. There's not much to do there. I know that this will probably be postponed until our next meeting. Catherine is out of the country right now, and I think the legal representative wrote me an email yesterday and said he would not be ready either, so we'll have to just wait until the next meeting on that. Is there any other questions on that before we move on, my board members? Did you have anything, Jackson?
No, just to note that I've not received any communication from Catherine Keith or Sean Lynch since our last meeting. We understand the request of Sean Lynch was to pen a letter to the policy board covering the CFR and Alaska statute citations that he provided in the operating agreement edits and what they're trying to accomplish. So I've not seen that letter yet, nor received any update
No.
from either party.
In the email he sent, he said he wasn't quite ready with the letter, so we'll see that, I'm sure, at the next meeting then. That takes us to item 8B. This is the tip amendment, which is an action item, pages 27 to 67. Jackson, why don't you give us an introduction?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Cleaver. So beginning on page 27, this is a memorandum that I typed up to the technical committee with some of those decision points that I mentioned during my staff report for our upcoming funding amendment. And I do want to reiterate that while we have prepared a preliminary draft of the TIF amendment, is not yet complete. I am still waiting on, again, funding amount details and schedule details for a number of projects. But what I put together here on pages 27 and 28 were some decision points where I needed feedback from both DOT and the technical committee on how to move forward with these items. And after I get through an introduction of these 2 pages, I'm going to give you an overview of the motions made by the technical committee, providing some recommendations of the policy board on what to do with about half of these decision points. So number 1 on this page relates to the conformity freeze. Again, as I stated, we're still underneath the conformity freeze. We hope it to be lifted in the next month or 2 or 3. But there are 4 projects that were effectively paused due to the conformity freeze from advancing to construction. And that included the Steese Johansson interchange, Old Steese reconstruction, Airport Cushman intersection, and Steese Highway milepost 2 to 5 resurfacing. So I'm still waiting on information from DOT on which, if not all of these projects are ready to be delivered to construction in 26, 27, or later in 28. Currently, all the construction funding for these has been pushed out to 2028 or beyond. But I believe some of these projects are ready to go to construction earlier than that, and we need to modify our funding plan to accommodate that. So again, this is not a decision point for the board here today, but I need more information from DOT to update our amendment. Number 2 is the Pearl Creek Elementary access improvements. I covered that in my staff report. Really what we're facing here is we have a $4.5 million construction project scheduled for this summer. The project has not yet gone out to bid. And we're waiting to hear whether or not the school will be closed on February 4th. If it is closed, I don't think it would be a good use of our money to do this access improvements project at that school facility. So the technical committee had recommended underneath this item to ask DOT to delay putting this project out to bid until we learn the fate of Pearl Creek. And if Pearl Creek Elementary is closed, again, with that $4.5 million, we would want to reinvest that into another project that is already on our priority list. We'll go down to the next one that needs funding. So I don't necessarily have a list for the policy board here today and what those projects might be. If it is closed, of course, I will present that to the technical committee and policy board next month, some options for use of this funding. But just want to make note, this is air quality funding. So it is somewhat restricted to transportation projects that improve air quality. It's not as flexible as some of our other funding sources. But I'm confident that we can find a home for it if we need to switch gears on this.
How did we get it, it's air quality funding, how did we get it to a parking lot in school?
It's not only the parking lot, it's a new access road to the school, brand new driveway in addition to their current one to separate parent and student drop off and pickup from the buses that go to and from the school. So it separates traffic, improves traffic flow, and resolves the situation where on Auburn Drive, so
we were able to use this funding.
There's quite a bit of research on health impacts for idling school buses around small children.
Yep.
Hi.
Thank you, Ms. Rolls.
And
that's what I was going towards.
The funding also, yeah, you can help them improve congestion. So if you have, and that's one of the concerns that they have out of that facility. Okay, item number 3 on the next page There are 4 new highway safety improvement projects that DOT is requesting be added to our funding plan. This includes a new roundabout at the PD Nordell intersection, some variable speed limit signs on the Richardson Highway between milepost 341 to 362. Some accessible pedestrian signal upgrades at PED signals kind of throughout the community. And then a road safety audit for the Peridot Street crossing at Richardson Highway. These 4 projects have not been previously coordinated with the technical committee and policy board. So we did ask that Nathan Stephen of DOT provide a presentation on all 4 at our technical committee meeting last week. I didn't really see any concerns from the technical committee for the last 3, but there was a lot of discussion surrounding the PD Nordell roundabout. Also of note, we have received 7 written public comments, which are included in your packet here today on that. So I'm hoping for some discussion on it. But with this item here, the technical committee did recommend adding in all 4 of these projects to our funding plan, but to change the scope of the PD Nordell roundabout to simply a PD Nordell improvements project. So that the preferred alternative for what's to be constructed out there is not predetermined. And after I kind of get through my report here, we do have Pam Golden on the line that would like to speak to the potential consequences of changing that scope, because it may actually fully defund the project if it's not a roundabout. And so she'll provide that clarity to you all here in a minute. And then items 4, 5, and 6 relate to balances of available funding in this current year and future years. Really what to highlight here is in 2026, we have a $4 million hole. So this is funding that is available to program to new or existing projects, and we need to find a home for it. And then in 2027, we have $10 million in available funding that needs to be applied to new or existing projects to get those going. And it would be good to start the conversation now on what we might want to plan for that funding. Ideas that I presented to the technical committee for 2026 funds for that $4 million was to initiate a project start for Barnett Street reconstruction in downtown Fairbanks, and to provide the sufficient funds for the Cowell Street Phase 2 project from First Avenue to Airport Way to design the undergrounding of the overhead utilities, as well as bolstering funding for the Geist Road corridor study. This is currently funded at $300,000, but based on feedback from DOT, that might not be sufficient to complete the amount of work that DOT envisions for that corridor study. For this item, technical committee did recommend starting the Barnett Street reconstruction project, as well as fully funding the design of undergrounding the overhead utilities on Cowell Street. Between those 2, it would take up about $2.5 million in work for that project start and that design for Cowell Street. So it would take up just over half of this $4 million and still have some left over. And it's good to have some available funding in our plan, such that when we're in construction, we can afford change orders as they come up. So I thought those were good ideas at technical. And then for 2027, we have this $10 million hole there of available funding. That's largely because we pushed Mini Street out a year based on feedback from the DOT project manager. So I have asked the project managers for Cowell Street, Mini Street, and Holmes Road to see if any of those 3 large projects could potentially be accelerated into 2027 for funding. Preliminarily, I'm hearing that Cowell Street Phase 2 might be ready in 2027. That's not definitive, but that might be a good option for us. I have not yet heard back on Holmes Road, but it sounds like Mini Street is not on track to be accelerated to 2027 due to the amount of right-of-way acquisition out there. So again, I'm still waiting on some confirmations from DOT, so I don't know if this will be part of an action item here today, and the technical committee didn't make a recommendation last week because we didn't have enough information on these 3, but those are 3 projects that could soak up $10 million and nearly fully fund their construction in 2027. So the rest of the information in your packet is just background information on the request for the new highway safety improvement program projects and the public comments that we received on PD Nordell, as well as the actual preliminary draft of our TIP amendment. If you want to dive into any other project that I didn't discuss here. But I was hoping to give Pam Golden a little bit of floor time to talk about the dynamic with the PD Nordell roundabout and the consequence of the recommendation made by the technical committee. So that's all. Thank you. Chair.
Let's do that before public comment so that they can hear what she has to say.
Pam, if you're still with us?
I am, thank you. For those of you who don't know my background, I was a Northern Region traffic and safety engineer for a little over a decade before I passed that along to Nathan Stephen, and now I'm the statewide traffic and safety engineer. So I have been through this process many times. When the HSIP program is a little unique in that it is a data-driven program, and with the single-minded purpose of eliminating the potential for or crashes that have occurred for serious and fatal injuries. So I do want to preface this by saying the Nordale PD area has sort of been on our watch list, if you will, since 2021. So we don't jump in often immediately the first time an area appears to go after projects. So when the regional traffic engineers are looking at crashes in an area, they're looking for trends. And many of the potential project areas sort of fall off the list because we've either recently done a project there's a design project, there's a construction project. So we try to really wait and take a good hard look at crash patterns. So Nordale PD was proposed as a roundabout. We do have to select a countermeasure to get a project into the HSIP program. And so they must start with basically, I don't want to say predetermined because it's a data-driven process to figure what type of improvement would do the best job of reducing crashes and give us our biggest cost return in crashes eliminated. So I did listen to the technical committee meeting, and what gets a little concerning, as Jackson said, and Jackson, do you have the email I sent that you have shared, or should I cover that? I'm not sure what the policy board has available.
No, that was received after the meeting packet went out, so it
Oh,
was not
absolutely.
included in the publicly available meeting packet. So I was hoping that you would summarize the email that you sent to me.
Absolutely, no problem. So as I said, regions must identify a countermeasure that they intend to implement, and this is how we determine if a project is eligible for the highway safety improvement funding. This is all in a process laid out in our HSIP handbook, which is our agreement with federal highways as to how we will administer the program. There are examples where the scope of an HSIP project has changed during the design process. We do have a way to step through that involves the region sort of proposing the new scope, doing the cost benefit analysis on what the new mitigation would be, and then we renominate the project back into the program. We don't have to stop and start a new project. We just have to renominate it to make sure that eligibility is good and we can continue to rank for funding priority. That said, when it comes to what the scope says, just putting it out there, the project name does not have to match the nomination name. The project name could be Nordale PD intersection improvements. The scope, however, to match the what federal highways knows what we're planning to do, what the program has accepted, we believe has to stay as roundabout and cannot be open-ended as suggested. That said, if something else rises to the top as better, is my sound working?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. Somebody said they couldn't hear me, so I was just checking. So we do have a way to transition. So we could call it an intersection improvements project name. The scope has to start as a roundabout. We can change course if something else is determined to be better through the NEPA process, the design process, however that sort of organically transpires. And I am willing to take questions on the process and how that works.
Hey, we do have some for you, Mayor Turge.
Yeah, if I may, Ms. Golden, thank you for your time today. You said that the roundabout was based on 2021 data. Would you be able to provide that data to the policy board so that we can review that? And then does that data also take into account that while you were collecting data on this, because of the resurfacing that was happening on Chena Hot Springs Road between 1 and 6 Mile. Does that take into account the additional traffic that was coming down Badger Road, across PD and up Nordale to get out further to Pleasant Valley, or in that general location to circumvent the construction and resurfacing along Chena Hot Springs Road during that time?
Great question. And I was obviously not clear in what I said. So we've been looking at this area since our 21 screening cycle, and our screening cycle is actually a 5-year window. Let's see, this one would have been, it would have included the Chena Hot Springs construction for sure, but it appeared 4 years in a row. So really over the course of, if I had to guess, 2017 to 2022, but even actually a few years prior. So there were some, going way back, there were crashes that occurred. We did some work with the Nordale project in 2011 to upsize stop signs and some other things to try to bring awareness to the intersection. And then things got better for a few years, and then they started to, it started to show up on our screening again. So it's a 5-year cycle. Right now, our most current available data that we'll be using for the fiscal 26 is the 23 data. This could have been data that ended in 21, and I apologize. Nathan knows all of those details far better than I do. We do have the crash data. I think it was in a presentation he gave to the technical committee, so it can be shared. He did look at crashes over the seasons, and they are fairly well spread across the year, so not just all clustered in the summer or the winter. Different conditions, dry, icy, snow. And hopefully that answers at least some of what you asked me.
Can I ask
Go ahead.
another follow-up question? When it comes to funding this project, you have estimated here at 4.851 million. Are you aware and working on the Chena Pump, Chena Small Tracks roundabout that you have budgeted at 6.88 million? And why is Nordale, the Nordale project, that you would be required to purchase land from at least 3 of the 4 corners of property owners there because of right of way? Why is there a $2 million differential? And with the ditches being so deep in the Nordale thoroughfare, the cost of that concerns me. I'm just curious where you got your numbers for design from, and then why we're just now hearing about this within the last month, and why it hasn't been brought forward for public discussion.
Okay, 2 very different questions, and I might have to tap into Al or Lauren, who are also online, to help with the small tracks versus this location. I think the small tracks one was actually estimated lower, and then of course we dial these in as we go through design. And with small tracks, I believe there is some issues with the slough that's right in that area, and relocating a pretty intense power line, but I would have to defer to one of them and their knowledge on how that project progressed. But as to why you're just hearing about this is kind of going back to these are data driven, so we don't have a pre-project process to bring things out. So this getting it into the tip is really sort of the start of our public process for an HSIP project. They are completely based on mitigating crashes. HSIP projects there are cases where they do not go forward. It is not a big deal. So this is the start of our public process.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Any other board members have questions at this time? Okay, we're going to go ahead and go to public hearing. Ms. Haney, since I put you off last time, I'll let you go first here.
All right. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity. My name is Barbara Haney. I am an assembly member, but my comments are not representing the assembly, but myself as a private citizen, a resident of the Nordale area, a former transportation planner in a past life, and I live out here. And I did get the accident data that is being referenced by the lady who just presented. And I'm going to tell you something. I was mortified to see the accidents on Freeman Road, the Alieska Yard, people leaving their driveway to go on to Nordale, nowhere near the intersection, and accidents on Lindsberg were being attributed to the PD Nordale intersection. The PD Nordale intersection is so far away from them. To put it in some kind of perspective for you folks that live in town, that would be like saying a transportation improvement, I don't know, down by Aurora would have some kind of impact on traffic down by, say, the Bentley Mall. I mean, the distance is a little exaggerated there, but it's really, you're adding into this mix data that isn't relevant and doesn't pertain. I went through that data. There were moose hits. There were what I call mailbox murders. That's when the DOT plow or private contractor plow goes and takes out a mailbox that's not an accident in the same magnitude of, say, a T-bone. All right. When you take a look at the data, you will see that the majority, and I provided that data in my testimony, you will see that the preponderance of accidents at the Nordale PD intersection are due to the lack of visibility coming from the eastbound traffic from PD onto Nordale. The traffic, they can sit there and say, oh, we got a bigger traffic sign. I don't care how you got one that's Godzilla sized. It won't matter because the trees have all grown back and you can't see the stop sign. There's no light there, so there's no visibility. You could put a roundabout there. There's still no visibility. You're just going to run into it in the dark. And so I really am against putting a roundabout there. You're going to dislocate major utility lines. You're going to disrupt commercial traffic out here. I mean, between the gooseneck trailers and the low boys that come through the area is huge. You've got 3 or 4 private businesses that use that intersection extensively for commercial traffic. And so I just have to protest against that. You would be interrupting the recreation opportunities out here. You see people with lower, smaller snowmobile kind of traffic. Boat trailers are heavily intensively used. And those are not, that's the kind of traffic that really has difficulty navigating a roundabout intersection. And you know, whether or not you build the roundabout, you're still going to have to cut those trees back. You guys know now, I've sent the pictures into you. You can't see the stop sign at all, not because it's not big enough, but because it's so far from the intersection, first off. And second, the trees have overgrown it. And so you got to put a stop sign up in the middle of a bunch of spruce trees. Nobody's going to see it. So improving the visibility of that stop sign by maybe putting a light on the stop sign, maybe cutting back the trees, would probably go a long way. In addition, during the study period of the data that she references, there was also improvements being performed on Badger between Nordale and Nordale PD and Badger PD. And a lot of traffic was going through that intersection to avoid the road construction over there. Last, I am really, in a way, kind of mortified that this is coming out at the present time. This weekend is when they're having the big memorial for the mother and daughter who were killed in an accident on December 3rd on Badger. I will not dispute whether or not Badger PD or Badger Nordale couldn't use some improvement. And if you're going to build a roundabout, if you just got to get that roundabout in, the best place for that is at Montgomery Holmes Badger. But if you want to look at highway safety improvements, cut the trees back on Nordale and do your study over on Badger Road, because that's where all the fatalities are at. You've got a major project that's getting ready to go in at Badger Plaque, and that intersection has had a lot of crashes with that totaled out cars completely. I'm talking major crashes, not like, oops, I slid through the intersection kind of accidents. You've had fatalities in several places on Badger, and there are plenty of opportunities to use HSIP funds to actually save lives. I don't know if he's online today, but the assistant fire chief is also going to be calling you from the North Star Fire Service, or he may have submitted an email. I don't know. And he would be very happy to work with you folks on going to areas where there have been major fatalities and injuries. If you look at the crash data of the incidents that I isolated that are actually due to that intersection, you will see there have been no fatalities and no injuries. I don't think it's an appropriate use of HSIP money. Thank you.
Thank you. I do believe we received a letter from the fire chief out there, and it's our packets. I don't think he's online here today. Is there anyone else out there that would like to give testimony to this action item? Oh, Kellen, why don't you come on up so we can get you on the mic here? Thanks.
My name is Kellen Spillman. I'm with the Borough Planning Department, and I'm speaking today as a technical committee member. This is a big item before you guys, and I'm going to say we haven't finished our work yet. This is the first time in my 15 years being involved in the MPO that I've seen this much money come available because of projects slipping and not having other projects shovel ready. So I thought it was important to get some recommendations on the record. That's the 3 recommendations that came out of the technical committee. You'll see I actually made the motion for all 3 of those, and I'll talk a little bit about my thinking with those and the concurrence of the other technical committee members, but we're not quite done with this yet. And I think that was some really good news Jackson brought up with possibly being able to escalate either Cowell Street or Holmes Road. Holmes Road's been a big priority of mine for years. Badger Road's the fastest growing area of our borough. We haven't had a lot of transportation investments out there over the last couple of years. I'll just briefly talk about my 3 motions. I think just for public perception, my first motion was to recommend holding off on going out to bid for the Pearl Creek project. I don't know the future of that school. I'm not in it every day, but I think it would look bad from a fast planning perspective to spend potentially upwards $4 million on a school that may be closing. So I wanted assurance from the school board on that. My second motion, I had some really good conversations with Bob Christash after on potentially escalating Barnett Street. I think that's been a big priority of this body for as long as I've been involved. I remember when we were supposed to do it at the same time as Cushman Street. I just didn't have enough funding for that. And then I think we have a great opportunity on Cowell Street to put the utilities underground. We can do a great project out there if we have utility poles still in the middle of the sidewalk. I think that would be maybe a disservice. I wish we could have done it on Wendell 15 years ago, but I think we have a good opportunity now. And then I guess most of the comments today, I really appreciate Ms. Golden's comments on the Highway Safety Improvement Program and the different aspects at play. I'm not an engineer. I'm not an expert in the federal funding when it comes to that. But right now we don't have a project. It's not a project. A project hasn't been started, but there's been a scope put forward that in my mind has a predetermined alternative. I really want to go out to the public. It's going in our tip. It's, technically one of our projects. I want to go out to the public with an open mind on this and not show that we have a predetermined alternative before there's even been a project started. I understand and appreciate that may complicate the funding. Again, I'm not the expert in that, but at least going into our tip, I'd like us to be a little more open if we could. But again, just taking a step back, we're not quite done with this yet. Haven't put together all of our recommendations. I'm hoping to spend more time. We spent well over an hour on this at technical committee. We need a lot more time than that. We're talking about, potentially $10 million now and what projects go. So I think we need to do a little more due diligence on that. So that concludes my comments, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Board members, are there any questions for Kellen? I guess not. Thank you. Is there anyone else wishing to give public testimony? See mine? No, okay. I'm going to say public testimony is closed. I'm going to turn over to the board. Mayor Church.
If I may, and I hope I'm not speaking out of turn, I also wanted to speak to a couple of the other projects through the HSIP program that have been submitted. Is that okay?
Sure.
The Richardson Highway, milepost 341 to 362 variable speed limit. There's not a whole lot of information about that, and it sure would be nice. I think it's great to see that, but it would be nice to have some information to go along with that. So if there is somebody online or as a board, if we can get more information regarding that project, I would like to hear that. The Peridot Street Crossing, RSA, there on the Peridot Highway crossing. I would just like to throw in 2 cents that there are businesses in North Pole who take in heavy equipment to work on and weld on, that are some up to 30-foot wide that come out of our mines. And to negate the access and crossing at Peridot would drastically change their business scope, change North Pole altogether, and congest the roundabouts and underpass that we have in the city if that was on the docket to be closed. So just putting 2 cents in before we kick the can too far down the road, that there could be some real heavy unintended consequences moving forward if a project was to get off the ground and get moving forward and get fast tracked. So with that, thank you. And thank you, Kellen, for speaking to that. Appreciate it.
Other board members? Yes, see,
Pam Golden had raised her hand. If you would like her to respond to any of the comments from Mayor Church. If not,
Who does? Okay. Pam, did you want to respond to something there that you heard?
I did. I just wanted to clarify. So Peridot just being road safety audit. Several years ago, we actually did look at making some physical changes at Peridot. We actually closed that project. We never started it. It was approved for funding. We walked away from it because of the very issues the mayor raised. And so this sort of second way of looking at it is to do this road safety audit where they can look at sort of where the traffic goes and look at are there ways to improve it. So there is no, I just wanted to clarify, there's absolutely no physical construction with a road safety audit. It's just sort of a kick the dirt, look around and see what might be a feasible thing to do out there to improve safety. So I just wanted to clarify that. I'm happy to talk a little bit about what VSL is if you guys are interested. But the other thing I really wanted to say about Nordale PD is it is in its second year in our since it was nominated. And if that project does not start before September 30th, it effectively just goes away out of our program. It would have to be renominated. And I just wanted that out there. No big deal if that happens. I just want everybody to be aware that that is where we're at.
Are there any other board member comments? I think the proper motion here might be to postpone. But I'll leave that up to the board members here.
Can I make a motion to postpone item 3, which would be 8B on our agenda for a later time?
But I recommend that you just postpone and didn't send the whole thing back because there's going to be a lot of. What is up to you?
I will accept that amendment. Thank you, Mr. Duke.
I second.
So the motion was made by Mayor Church to postpone to the next meeting.
I second the amended.
And seconded by Mayor Cruz. Do we have discussion on that, board members? Okay. Yeah, my concerns, but my 2 cents in here is with the Pearl Creek question, Nordale PD question, and also under the available fiscal year 26 funds, the $4 million. There's still some money on the table there, and I know that speaking just for the city, Bob has some ideas for some of the balance of that too. So I think that technical would like to get their hands on this again And by then they can have some questions answered by the school board and others. But it's just not anywhere near going out to public hearing at this point, so. Anyone else out there wishing to speak on the board?
Mr. Chair, yeah, I guess a question, if we take no action on the Pearl Creek issue, is there a risk of DOT going out to bid before our next meeting?
Take that.
Jackson. Yeah.
So I spoke with John Atardis this morning, who is the project manager for Pearl Creek, and they still, DOT still does not yet have in their hand their wetlands permit. So it's coming, but it's they're not ready to go out to bid. And my conversation with him is that he was going to honor the sentiment of the technical committee to delay the consideration of bid until we know if the school's going to be closed. So anyways, I had that conversation this morning. I think we're safe to assume it will not go out to bid until we hear an answer from the school district.
Okay, great, thanks. So we're safe to sit on this. Appreciate it, Jackson. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Anyone else? Seeing none, would you call the roll on the motion to postpone, Jackson?
Yes. Mayor Church.
Yes.
Mayor Bruce.
Yes.
Mr. Cleaver.
Yes.
Mr. Olds.
Yes.
And Mr. Kraus.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0. We're moving on to new business. Item 9A. Why don't you go ahead, Jackson, give us a report on that.
Okay, included on page 68 in the packet, you'll see a draft comment letter that I prepared for comments on the Federal Register notice regarding the interim final determination to defer sanctions for the PM 2.5 non-attainment area. These Federal Register notices came out the day after our last technical committee meeting. Or actually, maybe it was the morning of our technical committee meeting. So this is not a comment letter that the technical committee has reviewed, but we are on a deadline here to get this submitted to the EPA by early February. And I chose to provide a comment letter on this Federal Register notice and not the other one regarding the proposed approval of the state implementation plan, because this Federal Register notice directly affects us. So my 3 comments to submit to the EPA on this are as follows. The first one is simply supporting the deferral and relief from the sanctions that have been imposed on us over the past year. My second comment is encouraging the EPA to expeditiously finalize the rulemaking and lift the conformity freeze at the conclusion of the comment period so we can get our construction projects back on track and get this funding amendment moving forward. And then my third comment is just reiterating to the EPA that the on-road mobile source emissions, the motor vehicle emissions, only contribute to 6.8% of the total emissions in our area. As we know, the predominant source of these emissions is wood stoves and other sources, and that we wanted to reiterate to the EPA that by punishing the transportation sector with fast planning and the DOT, it doesn't really correlate to the problem that is occurring in the PM 2.5 area, nor can fast plan or DOT influence, reducing emissions from other sources other than vehicles. So we just want to point out again for the 3rd time here, we've written previous letters regarding this, that we don't think that the punishment that we received really fit the crime here that had occurred. So it's a pretty simple, straightforward comment letter. But open to any suggestions for amendments to the letter.
Thank you, Jackson. This will require a public hearing. Is there anyone wishing to give public comment to this? Seeing none, public comment is closed. Board members, do you have any questions?
Mr. Chair.
Yes, go ahead.
Just thank you to staff for putting this together. Reads well. I would, do we need to move to approve Jackson sending this off?
We do.
All right, so I move that we approve the letter as penned by Jackson Fox, our executive director, that we see in front of us.
I'll second that.
Moved by Mr. Olds, seconded by Mayor Church. So we have that in front of us. Any other comments on the letter? I just have one. I mean, item 3, which Jackson talked about, is kind of a rehash of some of the things that we looked at in the prior year or so, but it is so relevant. The penalizing of fast planning in our community and the 4, membership groups that make up this policy board been penalized for something that, we are not the culprits here. We have nothing to do with it. Yet this is how they choose to sanction our area here. And just personally speaking, that's government at its worst, but any other comments? Go ahead and call the roll in.
Okay, Mr. Kraft,
Yes.
Mr. Olds,
Yes.
Mayor Church,
Yes.
Mayor Bruce,
Yes.
and Mr. Cleaver.
Yes. Thank you, Jack. That takes us to item 9B, for support for NOAA grant application for Chena Slough, Cripple Creek, and Chena Hot Springs Road culvert replacement. This fish passage, this is an action item. First, we'll get a staff report.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Cleaver. So beginning on page 74, you'll see my draft letter of support for the NOAA grant application that I described during my staff report. Again, this is for culvert replacements at road crossing locations on 3 different tributaries to the Chena River. That would include Chena Slough, Cripple Creek, and the Chena Hot Springs Road. And there's been a large assembly of project partners that are supporting this application. That includes the state of Alaska DOT, which would actually have funded, would design and deliver these projects to construction. Also has tremendous support from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, Alaska Department of Fish and Game, and some of our local nonprofits, the Tano Valley Watershed Association and Fairbanks Soil and Water Conservation District. I'm going to share with you real quick. I have some maps showing the locations of these culvert replacements, so you can kind of get a better idea of the scope of work. On page 83, you'll see the Chena Slough culvert locations. These are at the road crossing locations on PD Road, Rep Road, and Mission Road. So the red dots on the screen there. This figure is really telling though. As you look up and down the Chena Slough from the Chena River all the way into North Pole there, all the locations marked in blue have seen upgraded culverts or bridges replacing existing culverts. Many of these road crossing locations were washed out during the 1967 flood. And DOT did a tremendous amount of work back then to pull some culverts from their yard and go out there and patch these roads up so people could get to their homes after the floodwater subsided. And at these locations here on Mission, Rep, and PD, those are still the temporary culverts that DOT put in over 50 years ago, and they haven't been upgraded. Over the past 20 years, many of these road crossing locations have been addressed. Persinger, Nordale, Plaque, Airway Drive, Hurst Road, Dochi Avenue, Outside Boulevard, and Spruce Branch Drive. But there's just 3 remaining to patch up all of the road crossing locations along Chena Slough. So, and this is a high priority, again, for all those agency partners to finish this. And these locations in particular are very much supported by DOT's hydrology section. So they are undersized, there are earthen berms. And the plan is to, at each of these locations, not put in new bridges, but simply replace the existing culverts with larger size and perhaps more culverts there. And it's not just for fish passage. This is also for flooding resiliency, so that if we do have some major rain events, we don't have water over top of the road at these locations, and having the road incur damage from those events. On page 84, you'll see the Cripple Creek location. This is at Old Chena River Ridge Road. As we understand, this is actually in a borough road service area. This is not on a state road. But it's one of the final implementation measures for the restoration of Cripple Creek, which has also been a 20-year-long plus saga of restoring flow for Cripple Creek, getting down to the Chena River. And this is actually going to be a very large culvert, about 20 feet in diameter, so that there's a full stream bed on the bottom inside that culvert. So this is just a single, very large span. And then the last location on page 85, you'll see this is on Chena Hot Springs Road. This is near Milepost 25. if you're familiar with the Rosehip Campground that's near there. This is where Lyrad Creek from the north flows south into an old channel of the Chena River, which is now a slough, and then goes down to the Chena River. So there's undersized culverts on Chena Hot Springs Road, which again is a DOT facility that the project partners would like to see upgraded with larger culverts at these two locations here where they cross the road. So again, back to letter, page 74. We're simply stating our support for this grant application. The board has previously supported a project to replace the culverts on Chena Slough. And these other two areas are new locations for the board. Cripple Creek is within our boundary. Chena Hot Springs Road, of course, is outside of our boundary, but I think that we could all support that despite that. And one of the great things about this grant application is that there's no match required. So it's kind of all in, and this will be the last round of the NOAA Fish Passage Grant. This may not be renewed in the next transportation bill. And we are allowed to ask for up to $8 million. So we'll be asking for the full amount. And the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, with a separate funding source, is fully funding the design of a couple of these locations. So there is some matching dollars that we can show, even though match is not required. So for your consideration, letter of support to add to their grant application. And the lead applicant, interestingly enough, is going to be Trout Unlimited. And as they have been successful on a previous round of this NOAA grant application down in the southeast. So they've kind of learned the tricks and tools and how to get projects funded, and they would like to support us in this. Even though we have no trout in the Chena River.
You read my mind.
So it's interesting, right? So anyways.
Okay, we'll get it done.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. This is an action item. We'll go to public hearing. Is there anyone wishing to testify on this? Seeing none, public comment is closed. Board, are there any questions?
I would move,
Discussion.
I move that we send the letter of support from Jackson Fox that is shown in front of us.
Is that Mr. Kress?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Kress.
Yeah.
I will second that. I think it's a great project, especially there at the Cripple Creek Restoration, where we have an overflow problem, and having an oversized culvert in there will help alleviate a lot of that. So thank you for making this happen.
Seconded by Mayor Church. Any other discussion?
To echoing Mayor Church's comments, this is a tremendous project. You know, our anadromous fish stocks need all the help they can get these days. I know they're facing challenges out in the open water, so helping them with when they're at their most vulnerable, you know, giving these little aleven places to grow up, I think is a key thing. Anything we can do to support our fish stocks is a public good. So yeah, thank you, Jackson, for putting this together. I'm hopeful that we are successful in our endeavor, in our request here.
Thank you. Mayor Cruz.
I'd like to thank Jackson for finding an entity such as Trout Unlimited, who knows how to do this and has a background of doing it. Probably increases the chances for success. Good job, sir.
As long as we can get a canoe and a kayak in them, that's good.
No, Papa wants motorboats.
Well, he's not here today. Okay, let's go ahead and call the roll, please.
Hey, Mr. Kraus,
Yes.
Mayor Church. Yes. Mayor Cruz,
Yes.
Mr. Clearwood,
Yes,
and Mr. Olds.
Yes.
motion passes unanimously. That brings us to 9C, which is another action item. Draft call for project nominations for EV vehicles charging stations. Go ahead.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Mr. Clear. This begins on page 86 of your packet. This is a memorandum that I drafted up, kind of explaining this item. This item, we did run out of time at our technical committee, so they didn't take this up on their agenda last week. But I did want to present this to you all for any feedback that you have on the draft call for project nominations and the fact sheet that we have prepared for this effort. And then direction on whether you would like to see this referred back to the technical committee to take another look at, or move forward after the technical committee provides input. But without further ado, the call for project nominations is pretty simple. It's on page 87. It's just a one pager here. That outlines the amount of funding that is available. Currently, the board has set aside 2.4 million in our air quality funds to design and install these charging stations. About $500,000 of that is for design. So there's just shy of 2 million that's available for construction. Eligible applicants would be any entity, so any of the local governments in this room, but also any private businesses that might be in our community that might be willing to host a publicly accessible charging station. The basic criteria that project nominations must meet are those top 5 there, which includes commitment to paying a 9.03% match. We also have behind this page, a 3-page fact sheet, pages 88, 89, and 90, which provide more detail on those and other requirements for these project nominations. And then on the bottom of the page there, on page 87, you'll see the application questions that we intend to put on our website for project nominations to be submitted to us. So it's, I mean, simple things like entity and applicant contact information, but we also want to know the type of charging station or stations that will be nominated, what that site host anticipates for use or users served, and any site amenities for users to access while charging their vehicle. We'd like to see them submit figures to us showing the project location and the proposed site layout for the charging station and parking spaces, which again, as we discussed last month, each station must have a minimum of 4 ports and 4 parking stalls per station. Can increase from there, but that's the baseline because we did receive previous nominations for just 2 ports. And with our federal funding that we have, it needs to be a minimum of 4 ports, which is covered in the fact sheet and on this page here. We want to see that they have done some coordination with Golden Valley Electric Association as far as the power needs for the charging stations and where power might be accessed and how far away that might be. Any safety considerations, if a charging station is built, it must be ADA compliant. That's part of the federal rules. But there's also a lot of other considerations with regard to security and illumination. And us being a cold climate, oftentimes it's good to have a pavilion roof over the charging station. And then the commitment to operations and maintenance requirement. We assume that each applicant intends to rely on a third-party contractor to operate and maintain these. I have been in contact with a company that does that work for the network of charging stations in Anchorage. That is Recharge Alaska. They are coming to Fairbanks next week, and I have meetings scheduled with them to talk about this project and their interest. But they are very interested in being that contractor to take care of all the charging stations in town, so it wouldn't be left up to the site host or the local government that may be applying for the funds that takes that burden off. And then we want to see some documentation of that commitment to paying the 9.03% match. You know, for the city or borough, it might be a resolution through the assembly, that match commitment. For a nonprofit, it might be a letter from their board committing to that match, but some type of documentation that they have the funds available and if awarded would be able to pay that 9% match for the project. Also for the application period, I was thinking it might be best for us to release this call for project nominations for 45 days to kind of give a little bit more time than usual for interested site hosts to take a look at this, communicate with us and get all their documents in order to submit. So I haven't picked dates yet, but in any event, again, this has not been reviewed by the technical committee yet. I think I've got a pretty good handle on what we're looking at here for this call for project nominations. So the motions will be up to the board, and if you'd like to refer this back to technical for any final advice before it goes out, or if you'd like to see technical review it and bring you recommendations for next month, or if you think it's fine and just give me a green light.
Thank you.
Up to you all.
We're going to go to public comments now. Is there anyone wishing to testify to this item? Seeing none, public comment is closed. I've got some things to say, but first I want to open up to the board members if you have any questions or concerns. Mayor Church.
If I may, thank you. I understand that the city of North Pole is signed on to be a location, and as we've talked,
over the past year as a council. Parking would be an issue. We don't necessarily have three-phase power close enough to be able to dial in, and the only location that would make sense is up against a waterway, Beaver Springs. As far as substitute locations throughout our city, would that be part of your 45-day comment period to be able to choose a substitute location to take care of that? And if we were to approve this today with the 45-day comment period, that would still allow the technical committee to look over that and still have 15 days after that before coming back to us, correct?
Yeah, so there's a few different questions there. First of all, we did have a number of locations nominated to us in the past prior to completion of our electric vehicle plan. So while we still have those, our intent with this is that for each of the local governments that have previously applied to take a new look at their applications and submit it through, resubmit it to us through this process, and you have every right to change the location of, the proposed locations of where you'd like to see a charging station, or maybe it's more than one location that, say, the city of North Poles is interested in. So, but yes, if this is referred back to technical, we wouldn't start the 45-day clock until after technical to look at this. So, so it might be mid-February that the 45-day clock starts. So actually, there's a month that folks can start gearing up with this. I mean, this is in the open public meeting packet, and there's a few folks that have already reached out to me waiting for this to be the official call. So people are working on it behind the scenes.
Thank you.
Other questions from board members? I have a few here. On the first page here, in the middle in that paragraph, the last sentence says, once installed, it is envisioned, and so on and so forth there. I was wondering if it would be clearer to say, once installed, a public or private contractor will be responsible. We're not envisioning it, we want them to be responsible for us. So I'm going to offer up an amendment to it that would read, once installed, a private or public contractor will be responsible for operation, maintenance, and so on there. If I can get a second.
I second that amendment.
Okay. Any discussion? Chime in too, Jackson, if you want.
I'm good with that.
Mr. Chair, I guess I'm unclear on what the main motion is.
Unclear what the amendment is?
No, what the main motion is. What are, you're amending the call itself, but are we referring this to the technical committee, or are we going to be approving this for submission to the public at this time?
We haven't made that decision yet.
Okay, I think it may be prudent to make that decision before we get into modifying the document itself. I'm going to move that we refer this to the technical committee so they can have a pass at it, and then it'll be cleaned up. And well, I'll make the motion that we refer this to the technical committee. I'll speak to it if I get a second.
Okay, well, the motion on the floor now is to amend. So your motion will be proper to postpone. But you can't make a motion on top of the motion until we deal with the first one.
Gotcha.
What would you prefer to do?
I will wait until the appropriate time. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Anyone else wishing to speak? To me, I think we have enough information here. I read it twice, and I think what Jackson has done is good. I'm not sure we need to go back to technical at this point. The 45 days, might be longer than that. I don't know. 45 might work just fine. I think we would get a good feel of it. And then when we get the responses, they would then go to technical committee and look at the feasibility of the applications that we have. See if they are financially capable of taking on this responsibility and that sort of thing. But I'm not sure we need to delay it and go back to technical. This is just an application form essentially, and I think we've covered most of the items in here and made it very clear to the applicants what's responsibilities are that we would require of them. But That's up to the board. First, let's go ahead and take care of the motion on the floor here. There's discussion on that first, and then we'll talk about the chronology of events. Seeing none, you call the roll on the original motion, or
Yeah.
amendment, I'm sorry.
We'll start with you, Mr. Cleaver,
Yes,
Mayor Church,
Yes.
Mayor Bruce,
Yes.
Mr. Krass,
Yes.
and Mr. Olds.
Yes.
okay, Mr. Kraft, do you still want to go ahead and make a motion to postpone?
No, I'm gonna, reading the room, I'm gonna make a motion that we, send the, publish the call for project nominations as amended.
Okay. Let's move to go ahead with the program essentially. Do we hear a second to that?
Second.
The moved and seconded discussion.
I look forward to seeing all the, interesting projects that we can come up with in our community to support EVs.
Thank you. Go ahead and call the roll then, I guess.
Okay, Mr. Krass,
Yes.
Mr. Olds,
Yes.
Mr. Cleaver,
Yes,
Mayor Bruce,
Yes.
Mayor Church.
Yes.
motion passes unanimously. That brings us to item 10, informational items, obligations and offsets.
Yeah, beginning on page 91, you'll see our current obligation report. We did kind of have a flurry of obligations in late November and December. Total dollar amount, not a whole lot. Our program's 8% obligated at this time. But I was happy to see that the $500,000 for Powell Street Phase 2 design did get obligated because those were old 2024 funds that missed the window for obligation last year. But those funds have been obligated and they've not been taken out of our 2025 total. So those 2024 funds were honored. So that's really the big takeaway here. And as shown on page 93, we do not have any offsets yet this year. And we just have a couple projects that may be closed out this year. That includes the fast improvement program from 2023 and the railroad resurfacing and widening project, page 94. That concludes my report.
Thank you. Any questions for Jackson?
Just
Mayor
as a
Crouch.
point of clarification, thank you. On 0844, for the high school access and circulation study, it does say North Pole, but when you dig into that further, it is all local area high schools, is that correct? It's just not pertinent to North Pole? That's on 92?
Yeah, so for the high school access and circulation studies, we did fund last year a study for the joint campus of West Valley and Hutchinson High School for a study. We had a scope prepared for that and that study is underway. It'll conclude here this spring or summer. So the next location for which we want to issue an RFP to hire a consultant team to do a study would be in North Pole. Okay. So there's $150,000 set aside. What we know from West Valley and Hutchinson, that might not be enough funding to complete that study. But we need to put it out to bid for consultants, secure a consultant, and then negotiate a fee, and then we'll know how much that might cost. But that is on our docket this year to get out on the street. So, and as the scope of that work is being prepared, I think it's appropriate that we share that with the city of North Pole to review prior to release.
Okay, thank you for that. I'm sorry for that FNG question there. I appreciate it.
Any other questions? Seeing none, do we have any other issues? Item 11. Do we have issues?
You.
All right. Item number 12, board member comments. Let's go ahead and start with those online. Mr. Olds, do you have any comments?
Apologize for my audio earlier. That's it.
Actually, for the most part, we heard you very well. Thank you. Mr. Kraft?
Pleasure working with you all again and look forward to being at the next meeting in person.
Thank you. Mayor Church?
No comment. Thank you.
Mayor Fruit?
Yes, our last two meetings, we've had a public comment period and we've had people in variations from 3 to 10 minutes. And I think we should have a more structured public comment timeframe. And Sheriff Dayworth, I think you and Mr. Jackson should take a look at that. State of Alaska is 2 minutes, City of Fairbanks is 3 minutes, or I think it's 3 minutes. We don't have a time frame. I think we need a time frame.
Okay.
So take a look at that and report back to us, please.
Well, I can give you my thoughts on it really right now. I mean, at the council level, I always wanted 5 minutes and you wanted 3 and we just agreed to disagree on that, but I don't really like clocks, but I also don't want people rambling on, and that's why at the beginning of the meeting, you know, I stated that try and keep it 5 minutes or less. If they go on from that, I would just interject and say wrap it up. I don't know if you want to leave it at that or make it more rigid. We'll talk about that.
Have it on our agenda for next time.
Okay. Okay, do I hear a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second, is there any objections to that? Moved by Mayor Prude, seconded by Mayor Church. Saying no objections, we stand adjourned.
Thank you for winning.
I think exciting, there's